warm welcoming to the one and only, always entertaining, Mr. Oleg Denisov. Hey.
Thank you. Hello, how are you doing, Stockholm? Everybody speaks English? Yes, of course, you definitely do, all right. Now we'll switch to Russian. Okay, my name is Oleg. Nice to be here. I'm from Russia and I actually live there, you know, in Russia, the place. I'm not one of those Russians who came here and settled at some point. You know, the ones expats. Well, immigrants. Well, some call them expats, some call them immigrants. You know, I'll just avoid those politically loaded terms and gonna call those Russians by their neutral technical name. Deserters. Do we have any Russians in, by the way? No Russians, that's right. You are? Where are you from? Right, that's not Russia anymore, is it? Yeah, or should I say not Russia yet? But anyway, that's fucking, I know. Still doesn't count anyway. So, yeah, but I can still assume actually that there are some Russians in the room, shall I, you know? Because they're just being silent when I ask. Because in Russia, we genuinely have a saying that silence means yes. Yeah, that's why we have such a well-developed democracy. You know, it works very well for us. So yeah, I like being here in Stockholm. It's great, and for the first time ever, actually, when I'm abroad, for the first time ever, I've been on tour for so long that for the first time ever, when I'm abroad, I visited a Russian cafe abroad. I visited a Russian cafe in Stockholm, and it's completely great. The food is amazing, right? But the only problem is the Wi-Fi, right? Because it's a little bit different in a Russian cafe. Because in a normal cafe, you come in and you get the password for the Wi-Fi, right? And in Russian cafe, you come in and the Wi-Fi gets your passwords. So other than that, completely fine. But you know, I like traveling. I like kind of learning about different, you know, ways of life. You know, for example, I've been to England and to Scotland this summer, right? And you know, I always like it when you kind of get some first-hand knowledge of other cultures, and you realize that some stereotypes that you have in your country prove not to be true. You know, for example, in Russia, we genuinely have an expression "to leave in an English way," right? And to leave in an English way in Russia means to leave without saying goodbye. Now, obviously, after coming to the United Kingdom over the last 2-3 years a few times, now I know that to live in an English way, in fact, means something completely different. Now I know that to live in an English way, in fact, means to be saying goodbye for 2 years and never actually leaving. That's kind of... Thank you. But my point is, right, this sort of knowledge brings people closer together. It brings English people and the Russian people closer together, because now to live in an English way means roughly the same as to live in a Russian way. And to live in a Russian way, as you might know from Crimea situation, for example, to live in a Russian way means when you're asked to leave a place, you say that you can't leave because I never actually came in the first place. But at the same time, you've always been there and you're not gonna leave because it's actually your fucking place. The result is pretty much the same, you know, so nothing happens in the end. So yeah, for some people it was kind of a bit close to the bone, wasn't it? right, Estonia, right? Anyway, so that's the sort of humor that I do, right? The sort of humor that I do political comedy, and I do it in Russia, you know, I do it in Moscow. I'm a sort of a resident political comedian of Moscow. You know, I do jokes about Vladimir Putin. So, as you can probably guess from that information, I'm on TV all the time. It's fucking... Never been there. No, but you know, there's lots of policies, arguably, which are kind of worth making fun of in Russia recently, because one of them is the policy that Vladimir Putin introduced. It's the policy of import substitution. Basically, what it means is, as part of the sanctions war between Russia and the West, you know, some of the Western products were stopped from being imported into Russia, so now we must have Russian substitutes for them. Yeah, that's your Friday night, by the way. Yeah, just listening. listening about the particulars of Russian fucking trading laws, isn't it? Right? Enjoy it while you can. So yeah, that's the input substitution. Basically, we must have a Russian substitute for everything. Like we used to have delicious, French cheese from France, but now we don't. But we have a Russian substitute cheese from like northwest of Russia. We used to have delicious Spanish tomatoes from Spain, but now we don't. But we have a Russian substitute tomatoes from like southern regions of Russia. We used to have a German violent abuse pornography, in which the ass of one man is being licked by 5 people. But now we don't. But we have a Russian substitute. A weekly television show, Moscow, Kremlin, Putin. And you can imagine the content, yeah? All right. What's with the tension, guys? Come on. I feel like to be honest, like with some of you, I feel like I'm doing this fucking joke in Moscow now. It's just, people just going, oh, that certainly sounds amusing, but should I? Just relax. Relax, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. I'm not even against Vladimir Putin, I would never say that. Particularly on record. I would never say that, but I'm a big fan of democracy, and some people say to me, oh, how is this possible? How can you like Putin and like democracy at the same time? It's simple. I think it's very easy, actually, just take me. I like Putin and I like democracy. I voted for Putin 7 times, actually, yeah? Yeah, in one day, yeah. Really needed cash at the moment, so, don't you judge. But again, that's, I'm still, I like traveling, I like doing comedy internationally. And, the thing that I'm fascinated the most about the world is how we all sort of, in different cultures, we all sort of look at the same world, but we experience it a little bit differently. For example, just the same situation, completely different attitude, the same situation. You can take any daily mundane situation, for example, here in the West and in Russia. Here in the West, let's say it's summer, it's festival time, great weather, everybody's walking around the main street of the town, everybody's walking around smiling. I walk down the street, I see a beautiful girl, and I smile at her. And she just looks at me and she just goes, thinking, he's probably a skinhead. Moscow, same situation, main street of town, festival time, summer, great weather, everybody's walking around smiling. I walk down the street, I see a beautiful girl, and I smile at her. And she smiles at me back. Thinking, he's probably a skinhead. A real man. Call me. And I'm not, right? I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my background. I'm far from it, actually, because my background is, I try to explain what it is. I'm basically, despite the way I look, right? I'm sort of a Moscow intelligentsia sort of thing, It sounds actually much cooler than it actually is, There's nothing honorable about this at all. Basically, what it means is that my education, it was in humanities. This sort of education was basically unchanged since the Soviet times, right? So as a result, I kind of know a lot, but I'm useless for any practical purpose, Just I don't have a lot of money. Just genuinely in the center of Moscow, there's an underground bookshop, very popular with people like me, which has an outdoor advert saying literally this phrase. It says, "Books are better than food." And I think it took some time and courage for the business owner, to reach acceptance of the fact that his customer base is mostly people who can afford only one of those 2 things at any given time, I go there a lot. I did lots of jobs, became a comedian. That doesn't help in terms of finances or reputation. I was flat hunting recently. I was looking for a new place to rent in Moscow, right? And the landlords always want the lodger to be sort of solid and serious person, right? So one of them asked me, like, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a stand-up comedian. He said, do you consider this a serious profession? And I said, yeah, well, last time I checked, nobody laughed. Everyone? All right. But it's really a legit question, though, on his side. Completely legit, because in Moscow, in Russia, like stand-up comedy is sort of a new form of entertainment. It's very young, it's maybe 10, 12 years maximum. So we, the comedians, when people ask us what I do, we just for the quiet life, we don't usually even tell that what we do is stand-up comedy. We just go for the next, closest thing. We just go, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm an actor. I don't know. I'm a wedding host. I'm a funeral host, anything, But I kind of got bored of doing this very quickly, to be honest. So I decided to do a different thing instead. Now I just, whenever people ask me what do, I just think of any weird shit that comes into my head, and I say it, and turns out it's still better than saying you're a comedian in Russia. It's just go, like any weird, I just go, oh, I'm a swordfish tamer. I don't know, I'm an accountant in a brothel, something like this. That any weird shit is better than saying you're a comedian. Oh, I'm a Ukrainian president. If I can just, all right. Thank you, 5 people, for following international politics for me. That's right. Should work better on this. The worst thing about my background, though, is of course that I studied philosophy at the university, right? So that means I'm sort of extra useless for the outside world, But there is one positive consequence for me, from having studied philosophy, and it's not a professional one, of course, but it's a personal one, because my girlfriend is also, actually a professional philosopher, right? So we kind of share a similar mindset, a philosophical view of the world, and we almost never argue. And even if we do argue, it's mostly about nothing. And that's kind of... I argue that nothing is a real ontological category. And she maintains that nothing is not really a noun, but rather a figure of common language used to construct a negative statement. Long winter evenings in Moscow just fly. But the thing is, right, there are lots of problems in Russia, obviously, and that's what I usually have to deal with, I have to meet certain expectations when I come here to the West as a Russian political comedian. There's lots of them. And obviously, the main expectation which is put upon me here when I started coming here is obviously that I should always tell everyone how shit everything is in Russia, right? Isn't it? It's just kind of like, oh, can you tell me all the shit that happens in Russia? Can tell us how shit everything is in Russia? Because we don't really get enough of it in the news, because maybe it will help us a little bit, with that, And I tried to do it, and there is, there's lots of things which are kind of shit in Russia, of course, that people just saying, oh, you're a political comedian, right? So you're something like Pussy Riot, right? Yeah. I am. Yeah, I am exactly like Pussy Riot in almost all possible major ways, aren't I? I mean, Pussy Riot, everybody, right? You kind of silent, the 4 girls in colorful balaclavas that did an anti-Putin sing and dance inside the main cathedral of Moscow, right? Went to prison for 2 years, got out, became celebs, got on stage with Madonna. Yeah, as if the prison wasn't punishment enough, It's kind of It's not the weirdest story, though, that we had. A couple of years ago in Russia, there was a guy who was arrested and criminally prosecuted for catching Pokemons in a church. Although in this case, I must admit, there's some logic behind the prosecution, because of all places, a church is obviously not an appropriate place to search for some creature that doesn't really exist, is it? Fucking weird, isn't it? It's like a religious community night out over there, what's up? So yeah, that's the thing, right? I tried to do this, as a Russian political comic abroad, and the first time I actually came to perform abroad was in 2017, right? For the Edinburgh Fringe Festival to Britain, right? And up until 2017, I'd never actually been to any English-speaking country. I'd never been to Britain, nor had I been to Australia, Canada, or any of Britain's other franchises, right? And it's kind of... But so the first thing I noticed that, of course, a difference in sense of humor, because they have weird sense of humor over there, they do jokes about the things that we don't really have back in Russia, like Marmite, elections, the middle class, sort of things. strange for me a little bit, But I always find, that the difference in topics, though, the difference in what people complain about in different countries. Because now in Russia, obviously, Pussy Riot, Pokemon guy now, that, and you understand that we kind of have a problem with freedom of speech, right? Obviously, from that, But and here you genuinely don't have a problem with freedom of speech, but but I'm confused sometimes at what opinions people in the West have about the freedom of speech, because some of them usually I hear this very often when people come up to me and say, well, actually, what I think is that we in the West, we kind of have too much freedom of speech, haven't we? There is too much offensive shit everywhere. I think we should shut some of this down. I mean, how is this possible? I wake up in the morning, I go online, I search online for 4 hours for something offensive, and then I find it, and then I get offended. And I shouldn't be exposed to that. Because the ones that I'm talking about, the professionally offended people, the ones that the professionally go, oh, I'm offended about this. I think it's beautifully great, that we all live in an open information society. Every bit of information is open to us at any given time, and it's all in our attitude. We need to work out our attitude, and there's more positive to it than negatives, obviously. Whenever I hear, this professionally offended people going on, oh, I find this and it was offensive, I always remember this metaphor, this story from my own life. One time I was searching for holiday options in the south of Russia, right? A very conservative sort of region, right? And the tourist brochure said that in this region you can't actually go in the nude on the beach. I was searching for a friend, okay? I was just like, you can't go in the nude on the beach. It's against the law. It's very conservative. But there is one hotel which offers such an option. It has a closed beach. It's closed to the public, completely closed. So your friend can go in the nude there, not a problem whatsoever. Completely fine, not against the law, but the local people are going to look at the nudists with disapproval. At a closed beach, the local people will come to the closed beach and look over the fence at the nudists with disapproval. They're gonna put up a 2-meter tall fence, but the local people will come and they will try to jump over the 2-meter tall fence to look over the fence at the nudists with disapproval. The local people, but they can't. So the local people will come and they will stack up their own children and step on them to look over the 2-meter tall fence at the nudists with disapproval. The local people will buy drones and learn to fly them over the nudist beach and film videos of the nudists and watch them at home with disapproval. The local people will dress up as dolphins and come to the closed beach from the sea and learn to jump out of the water high enough to shoot a quick glance at the nudists, and the glance will be full of disapproval. Now you clap. Yeah, fine. You see, I allowed you. That's freedom of speech, Russian way. All right, guys, that's my time. I've been Oleg Denisov. Protect your democracy and freedom of speech. And have a good night. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Oleg Denisov.